It is. And hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Lead, Thrive, Revive, Life Beyond Burnout. I am a co host, Leigh Felton, joined by the absolutely amazing Dr. Diane. This is where we talk about all things burnout, leading beyond burnout, authentic leadership, understanding your body mentally, emotionally, physically. And of course, our expert, Dr. Diane, helps to take us through that journey to learn the signals, to learn all of the things that, that our body is subtly telling us that helps us move through the various stages of life. So, hello, thank you for joining and welcome, Dr. Diane.
Hello.
Always nice to see you.
It's wonderful to see you as always.
So we've been talking. So this is I can't keep track of what number we're at, but we've
4 or
been
5
talking.
or something?
Exactly. We've been talking a lot about the various areas of, we talked about your body compass. We talked about your body budget, and I know as we go along, we'll dive further and further into these tools, into these techniques that people can use and start, really understanding what is it, who am I, what brings out the best of me, what makes me thrive. And one of the things that I thought was so interesting from the last conversation is that when we talked about authentic leadership, and that is like, if I talk about my platforms, one of my platforms that I am so passionate about is authentic leadership, and for leaders to bring their authentic selves to work, because that is what's going to help amplify others, new generations, to bring their authentic selves to work. But one of the things that we talked about in the last session is this idea of authenticity. It doesn't come without potentially pain, strain. I'm not going to call it masking or personas, but it doesn't come without sometimes having to put yourselves in situations like me in speaking, in being around people. It's like, I love it, but it drains and it sucks all of the energy out of me. And sometimes people think this notion of authentic leadership is that you get to come into a room, be exactly who you are, say anything you want to say, and you don't have to put up with anything that makes you uncomfortable. What are your thoughts about the takeaways from that discussion?
Yeah, that was a really rich discussion. And I want to invite everybody, if you haven't had a chance, I think that the videos on YouTube and then the other platforms that you have, Leigh. But we were talking about body budget and body compass and all of this, the central theme being, what is the actual root source of burnout? We've been talking about, and we've been saying that the root source of burnout is not merely that you haven't had your bubble bath this week, right? It's when we are suppressing our authenticity, when we are suppressing our genuine emotions. And so that's what we've been unpacking, right? So what's the opposite of suppressing one's authenticity and emotions? And that's where we've been getting into body compass and body budget and all of that. So to speak to your point, last time we were saying that, I think your question was something like, is it possible to be too authentic? Right.
Yes.
Right. Is it possible? And we talked a lot about the fit between your persona and the situation. Right. We're all playing a persona at a certain point in time, whether it's a persona as a mom or as a friend or as an executive or whatnot. Right. And
But when you
so,
say we're playing a persona, the persona isn't necessarily a mask or being fake. The persona are pieces of who we are.
right. Personas don't have to be fake. Right. But it is a way that we are social beings. Right. And so it's a way that, a role that we play in social contexts, and those roles change depending on the context. Right. So what we were talking about last time was what's the fit between whatever role or persona that you're playing with the situation. And that, to your answer, is it possible to be too authentic, like in that classic case of like TMI or something like that, right? Like
Right.
yes, if the let's say if you're a team leader, right, and part of what your team is counting on you for is a sense of direction and stability in the team, right? So
Okay.
to calibrate, like, what's the level of authenticity that's going to be of service to your team, you have to understand the situation, right? So there's a way in which the persona you can bring as part of your leadership can bring more of yourself, more of your authentic self into that situation without necessarily destabilizing what the team needs from you. And so what we're challenging ourselves, at least I've found this for myself,
Okay.
is in my own leadership journey, is that the more I'm able to find those parts of myself, my genuine parts of myself, and bring that into my leadership, it becomes a bridge of connection with my team. And it also models for my team that we can bring more of ourselves into that. And so
All right.
when it's the opposite, when we are not bringing any of our authentic selves into any situation, we shouldn't be surprised that we are burning out, because we're spending so much time and so much energy suppressing that in ourselves. So the challenge here in our growth is, how do we tune into what our authentic sense of self is, and then slowly in appropriate calibration with the situation, bring more
Right.
of that into our work and our everyday life. And there's more to unpack there, but I want to stop.
There's way too, obviously these sessions are 30 minutes at a time. And, as you and I talked about, this type of thing is something that you and I both are so passionate about. And literally we could talk and go on forever.
Maybe we should do that.
A marathon. But so one of the things, and it's interesting that you say that it's so draining, as when people have burnout, it's because they're not bringing their authentic selves to work. And and maybe it's because they haven't tapped into the various personas of who they are, what they represent. Because I know for me, and what we talked about last time, that even some of your personas, your authentic personas, are outside of your comfort zone and can be draining, in a good way, and that you have to refill your budget. But I don't want to get into that. So the question that I wanted to ask you today, it's interesting because I watched our video from the last session. Okay. and as you know, I'm neurodiverse. And for the longest time, I didn't do meetings on camera, because it's like, I'm this executive, I'm this leader, and I move a lot. To concentrate or to hear, I sometimes have to close my eyes. And so I watched the last session, and it's like, I wonder if people on the other side of this, discussion, they see me close my eyes and they're like, is Leigh even paying attention to Dr. Diane? And
what's happening?
yeah, right. But I wonder, I am personally completely okay with now very much moving and rocking, closing my eyes. It's who I am. And other neurodiverse people have reached out to me and they said, you know what? I appreciate that. It's like, I have my fidgets in my meetings or this or that. And there's so many people who, like I did in the past, they suppress that natural need. And so I spent so much of the time trying to be still and trying to, make sure that my face is presenting the way that it needs to present to look like an executive. Is there any guidance or thoughts, as we think about the physical? So we talked a lot about the mental health, the emotional health, but as we think about some of the physical constraints that we may have and that the different personas in us may experience, how do you help people get to the point of, not even just neurodiverse individuals, but how do you help people get to the point where their physical attributes, and that especially for women, when it comes to age, when it comes to weight, with men, it comes to hair, that their physical attributes are part of who they are, and to be able to embrace that?
Wow, that is a really good question. And it will deserve us talking about it a couple sessions, I think,
Okay.
right? Wow, that's a really good one. I think where my mind goes, I have a friend visiting me right now who's a performing artist and a dancer, and someone who's really immersed himself in movement and the connection between movement, awareness, and authenticity, you could say, right? And so, that's a whole field, right? That's a whole field of study that people, um, uh, uh, study and practice authentic movement, right? Authentic, so another thing that my friend does is he's a yoga teacher, right? And so
Okay.
part of what you're doing in a yoga situation is you're tuning into your body as it is, not as you imagine it to be or as you want it to be. It's like the actual physical sensations of your body and your awareness in your body in that given moment. So that kind of practice, whether it's yoga or dancing or any other kind of physical practice that you do, if you use it as a way to connect in the present moment to the reality and authenticity of your current physical experience without trying to change it, without trying to judge it, then you start to be able to notice, how is my body physically in each of the personas or each of the roles, or however you want to call it, that I play in my life, right? So
Right.
let me give an example. So sometimes when I'm working with clients who are leaders or executives, one of the things I focus on is posture, right? So when you're sitting, like we can try it right now, right? So
Okay.
so Leigh, take a regal. If I say to you, Leigh, take a regal posture. So take a posture that makes you feel regal, right? So it could mean that you find a posture in your spine that's both uh, straight, but also relaxed. So you want it to be
Straight
straight, but you
posture.
don't want it to be uh, rigid or kind
Okay.
of stiff, right? So you
Okay.
find a way. You can focus on your shoulders, and kind of throw them back a little bit. You can be really connected to your sitting bones. And if you take a seat like this, like
Hmm.
if you've ever seen, like in Black Panther, right? Or in uh, I saw a movie with Viola Davis, Woman King. Have you seen that? It's so good. Viola Davis in anything. Hello, Viola Davis in
Yes.
anything. Okay.
Yes.
If you watch her sit when she's playing a regal role, or any of people playing a regal role, and they sit in a certain way that is like very calm, but also very steady,
Hmm.
and also like as though they have a panoramic view, and
Okay.
as though they are sitting at the center of their own realm, right? And they know that they don't have to go to anything. People will come to them, right? So you can imagine that when you are thinking that way, your body
Hmm.
feels different and you hold yourself differently, right?
I'm actually breathing better. I
See
mean,
that?
I'm a very relaxed person, and I have this chair because it bounces and moves, and it helps me just relax. But even taking that moment to
Hmm.
sit up, to sit straight, but also just be relaxed, it helped me just pause
Yeah.
and breathe and
Mhm.
just it's like tension kind of
Mhm.
melted.
Yes. There's a lot of scientific research on this as well, right? That like different stances and postures evoke different mind states, right? So you
Mm.
once you start paying attention to that, and you start paying attention to how is my body when I'm in different roles, and am I holding myself in a quote authentic way? What does that even mean? Who asks themselves that? Like we have to start practicing asking ourselves that. Am I at
Oh,
home in my body, no matter
oh,
what role I'm playing?
I
You know,
absolutely love
and then
it. I love
there's so much unconscious, especially when let's say different layers of trauma that we might have, right? It's
right.
also very well known in the scientific literature that trauma is written in the body, right? It
Okay, can you written how? Written where?
Okay.
What do you mean by the actual verb written?
Okay, so I'm saying written in this like kind of sounds poetic, but I'll tell you what it means. So
Okay.
uh, when people scientists who study stress and emotional resilience, they talk about, and burnout, talk about the stress cycle, right? So it's a cycle. Stress doesn't always have to be bad, right? Stress is like when you work out in a gym and you're quote stressing your muscles, that's how your muscles grow, right? The
Right.
important thing about the stress cycle is that you put your body under some kind of stress, and then it's the recovery or the resilience, the bounce back, right? And so your body naturally knows how to do that. And it's such an amazing element of the natural intelligence of the body. And so what we want to do is understand what that natural intelligence is and let the body do that, right? So, but what happens in trauma is that trauma is an extreme form of stress. So what
Trauma is
happens is extreme
stress.
form of
Okay.
stress happens, and you might have heard of the thing, fight, flight,
Fight
freeze,
or freeze. Yes.
and there's others that people are coming up with now, right? But what happens in the stress cycle in trauma is that your body gets stuck in the cycle and it doesn't complete. So let's say if you had a freeze response to a trauma, right?
Mhm. I know a lot of people that freeze,
Right.
and
So a
it's
lot
just
of
like,
people do.
I
People,
can't, right. It's just like,
right. So there's a way that your body will kind of clench down in that moment as a way of protecting itself.
mm,
Right. But because in many traumatic situations, you're not able to complete that cycle of allowing your body to naturally bounce back to its original kind of state of equilibrium. Right. So when I say trauma is written in the body, what I mean is whenever traumatic experiences happen, there's a pattern that our bodies hold
we
in
are
our
natural
action.
in whatever the terms are that people use or come up with.
Right.
We naturally navigate towards, and let's just focus on the three right now. Freeze, fright, freeze, flight, or fight.
Correct.
So we are naturally um, conditioned or you said ridden, but
Hmm.
we naturally move into one of those areas.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing? Is that a comforting thing? Like if I'm a fighter, when
Yeah.
trauma comes, it's like, you know,
Right.
is that a good thing that is like I naturally allow myself to be there, or is that not necessarily, even though that's my natural
Hmm.
progression,
Okay.
do I need to restrain being that natural way?
Okay, so let's look at something. The reason why we have fight, flight, or freeze, it's an evolutionary response that allows us to survive,
Mm,
right? So
yes.
that's important. We do what we need to do to survive. Right? And so in and of itself, those things are not good or bad. They're part of who we are as human beings that keep ourselves safe, right? So, what the downside of that is when the reaction is not appropriate to the situation. So, what happens when you're traumatized, and in some cases, the trauma can be chronic. Meaning,
Mm,
if you're
yeah.
a BIPOC person, a queer person, a neurodiverse person in this world, all the microaggressions and overt and microaggressions are happening all the time. Are death by a thousand cuts type of thing, right? So like, so your body begins to hold itself a certain way, right? It's sort of and it becomes like a groove or a rut, literally a neural pathway in your brain that you've just become accustomed to, and so you hold yourself like that no matter what the situation is,
Okay.
even when you're safe. You just have your body has learned to hold itself that way. And so when your body's in a constant state, it's burning up a lot of energy staying in that state, right? Like when you said, oh, when I did that thing with the regal posture, I
Right.
relaxed. Actually,
Right.
that was you reminding yourself, Leigh, I'm safe, I'm here, I'm just talking to Diane, nothing bad's happening to me, right? And then all that energy that you were using to crunch up, you were just relaxing, and now it can go into the conversation, it can go into fueling your brain to do other things, to be more creative, like that. So in trauma, the stress cycle isn't completed. That's part of what happens. Does that make
That
sense?
is no, I mean, to me, and for everybody out there, if you have questions about this, please put it in the I am window. If you want clarification in particular areas, please just go ahead and ask. But it absolutely makes sense to me, and it's so interesting because if you had asked me prior to you saying, Leigh, get into a regal position, and it's this sturdy state, but yet it's still relaxed, and that allowed me to even be more relaxed. If you had asked me prior to doing that, Leigh, are you tense? Are you
Right.
nervous? Or any of those things? I would have said no. It's like,
Mhm.
I feel completely comfortable, completely relaxed. Is that just because I either am fooling myself, or was I relaxed? I have just learned another level of relaxation.
It could be all of those things, right? Like, because you have conditioned yourself after decades of being an executive, right?
Mhm.
When this thing goes live, you're on. You're Leigh, right? The Leigh that's
But am
on
I
the
not okay? You met me in
platform.
person, and we've had conversations in person.
Mhm.
Am I different here than I am when we're having these types? I mean, I know I can get serious
Yeah.
on certain
No, not
topics, and I can
necessarily.
be introvert, but
Not
when we're having
necessarily.
these kind of discussions,
Not necessarily, but what I was gonna say is you said, "Oh, gosh, I forgot what you said, but you said it, uh,
I said that,
I lost it.
was I actually not relaxed? And I thought I
Oh, are you
was, but
relaxed? Both are
or
true,
did
right?
I just find a new level of relaxation?
Both can be true, right? You could have been, answering me genuinely and saying, "I feel relaxed," but
Yeah.
there's always deeper levels of relaxation that we can tap into, and sometimes we can't tap into that until we realize where we actually are is not the deepest level of relaxation we can be in. Right? And that we have
Yeah.
learned to, in order to move in the world, we've learned to hold ourselves in a certain way that's just become our standard operating procedure, and we don't even notice it. Right? It's
So
like
do we
me
have to consciously
when I
stop?
walk
I mean,
into.
like, how do we do that? Do I need to consciously stop and say, okay, I'm going to practice the regal position. So I need to consciously schedule in my day, 2 times a day, that I'm going to practice this until it becomes this natural part of me. Or
Yes.
how do you become that?
Yes, it does take practice, because what you need to do is you need to develop a new neural pathway. Right? The neural pathways that you have are the ones that you have protected you and allowed you to survive and thrive up until now. And if
Okay.
you want to make a new habit, AKA a new neural pathway, you do have to consciously, with intention, practice it. And so you don't have to make it a big deal either. Like, one of the things we talked about before was, this idea of like a little cocoon, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
it could be like 5 minutes in the car when you get home from work and you're unbuckling your seatbelt and you're about to go in and see your family or whatnot. It doesn't have to be very long. It could be the length of a song. Play a song in your car
Right.
for 3 minutes and just let practice your posture, or do whatever practices that we've been sharing here, like asking
Right.
yourself, how am I really feeling? Really give
Really.
yourself permission to tune into a deeper level of relaxation, or to practice your regal posture, or to ask yourself um, how am I genuinely feeling, with nobody else around to listen except yourself. But it is true that you do need to intentionally create situations where new neural pathways are formed, because you can think all you want to change, but if you don't practice it and let the neural part of it emerge,
Right.
then you'll when you're under stress, they say, when you're under stress, you rise to the level of your practice, right?
Interesting.
Not to you don't you, not to the level of your intention, right? Like, when you're under stress, when you're in a big game, if you're an athlete, and you're under pressure, you're not going to hit the 3-pointer in the big game, right? Unless it's in your body,
Can we
because
use another metaphor than sports? I'm sorry, because in
okay.
all of these business, leadership corporate meetings I go to, it's like
I know,
everybody
right?
wants to do sports, and it's like, okay, we
Let's
literally
let's do different
miss out on
metaphors here.
connecting with so many people by
Yes,
using sports. Is
this
there
is
any other analogy that you can give us?
sports-free metaphor zone. Okay, from now on.
Well, I mean, if
Yeah,
that is your space, it's like I don't tell leaders to not do those analogies. I just
yeah,
say if you're
yeah.
going to do those analogies, also do others that can bring
Okay,
in more people that don't connect
let
to
me
the
do another analogy. Okay. Again, I have
Mhm.
a friend here who's a performing artist, so like that's my metaphor. That's in front of me, literally, is um if you're on stage, right? And the pressure's on, it's opening night or something like that. right?
Okay.
What when you're under pressure, what will appear is what you've been practicing, not what you've been intending, right? So if you intended to give a good performance, but you didn't actually practice, when you're under
Okay.
pressure, your body is going to resort to its body memory, right? It's the same thing. Like if you've experienced trauma in your life, when you're under pressure, your body reverts to the memory that's in your body, in your cells, so to speak, right? In your muscle memory, as they say, right? So in order to be able to pull out the new habit or the new way of being in a pressure situation, you have to practice it when you're not under pressure so that you can access it. Because when you're under pressure, your amygdala starts turning on, your prefrontal cortex starts to go offline. So what it needs to be is in the other parts of your brain it's in your body, so you can access it, right? When the
And
triggering
so,
thing
for
is.
instance, Dr. Dan, so you led me through the regal stance sitting posture
Yes,
exercise.
yes.
So that's one that helped me that may or may not resonate with other people
Mhm,
who are listening. Are
mhm.
there, other examples that you can provide? I just want to make sure that we give them a couple of takeaways before we wrap things up. So the regal
Totally.
posture, I love that. And that's the one that I'm going to focus on and I'm going to practice because it literally I mean, it's strange because I move so much, and it's just like it's just naturally releasing my energy when I move, but just consciously thinking about not moving, but not constraining myself, but actually relaxing in
Yeah.
this posture and being conscious and present and being able to breathe. It actually relaxed me on another level, even though I already thought I was relaxed. In addition to the regal, can you give us one additional technique that might be helpful for people, to try?
Yeah. Can I give two?
Okay. You want to get
So,
free? Yeah, sure.
well, there's one famous one that probably a lot of people who are listening have heard of before, but it's like the superhero stance, right? So if you're standing up, you ever see a superhero poster, a movie poster, right?
Yes.
Where you put your hands, you can't really see, but you put your hands on your hips like this,
Okay.
right? Wearing your underwear on the outside of your pants is optional, especially if you have a job
Okay.
interview
I
or
think
anything like
I'm
that.
gonna pass on doing that one, especially since we're on air. But
So like that,
okay,
and
let's keep going.
you stand like that, right? And you're
Okay.
very steady and like kind of like a mountain, but you've got your hands on your hips and you're looking straight ahead and you really are taking your stance, a strong stance. That's a
Okay.
famous one, right? If you practice that, people often practice that like in the bathroom with the door closed, before an
Okay.
interview or something like that. But
I
they've
didn't
shown
feel anything with that one, but I think,
other
other
people
people,
have.
I
Yes.
could imagine this just being a powerful,
Yeah, powerful,
I'm,
right?
I'm taking charge of me. I am the
Yes, right.
superhero of Leigh,
Yeah.
whoever you are.
So that's one, right? And I'm going to give a soothing one too, right? So like if
Okay.
you're feeling agitated, right? Another one is, I think they call this butterfly hug, right? So you take one hand like this and the other hand like this, and you put them under your armpits, like that,
Okay. Okay.
right? And you just kind of you breathe a little bit, and it's very soothing.
And
So
so is this a breathing exercise?
if you put your hands opposite under the opposite armpit, yeah, it's like you're giving yourself a hug.
Oh, hell yes. I I I actually truly believe that, and I posted it a few weeks ago. It's
Yeah.
like give yourself a hug. Oh,
Yeah,
I
and then I mean,
truly
it's
hug.
I
Okay.
know people out there are gonna be like, "Well, that's hella corny," but
It comes
but
from however, it doesn't matter.
actually, it soothes the nervous system.
Dr. Diane, are your thumbs out or does it matter?
That's just how I do. It doesn't really matter, but that's how I've seen it done, right? And there's endless ones, like you could research the endless ones, right? Putting your hand on your head or on your belly. You could just put your two hands on the lower part of your belly. That also helps you breathe into your belly and soft breathing into your
Yeah, I've
belly.
done this one before. That
Yeah,
that that one I've done in breathing techniques, but you
yeah,
also get to ground yourself. Okay.
yeah. So there's
We're
endless
almost
ones like that.
okay. And this is, I mean, and so one of the things that we've talked about is not just the theory of authentic leadership, because it's always easy to say, oh, just be your authentic self. You know, you're going to be so less stressed if you're just naturally who you are. And, you know, you can lead beyond burnout if you learn to just embrace, you know, your authentic self. And we know it's so much easier said than done. And so I sincerely appreciate you, because there are things that we can consider. There are things that we can, you know, that we can truly stop, pause, you know, whether it's physically, emotionally, mentally. There's things that we can stop and pause and do to help us
Yes.
get to that space of authenticity. So
And
I'm
and
gonna let you
yes,
close, but I appreciate it.
thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing more things. There's a lot of science out there that can help us. So we'll continue to share that with everybody.
Sincerely appreciate it. As always, Dr. Diane, I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful weekend. This is Dr. Diane and Leigh Felton, Lead, Thrive, Revive, Life Beyond Burnout. We are here every other Friday, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Take care, everybody.